Hello, everybody, and welcome to a bonus episode of the Auto Buyer's Guide podcast. We couldn't get all of our thoughts off our chest on what exactly is right and wrong with every new car company on sale in America today. And we're going to talk about the news. But before we get to that, let's roll one of those other intro jingle options and see what y'all think.
Auto Buyer's Guide.
So Travis, surprisingly, a lot has happened since we last spoke because there was an auto show in China.
Yeah, I mean, it was just a couple days, but news travels fast, and the automotive world is hardly a slow one these days. I'll tell you what, though, the thing I'm most excited about or most curious about is the announcement of a new Cadillac V model. It's the Optic V.
Yes, the Optic V, to go with Lyric V and all the other Vs. And this makes me wonder, when are we going to get an Escalade IQV?
IQLV.
A QLV?
I mean, that's one I want.
It could be LVMH. I don't know.
Yes, there's so many things we could do with it. I am really curious to see what they're going to do here, though. I mean, the V just means, at base level, it means more power. My question is, are we going to do anything to wheels, tires, suspension, right? If things can get tightened up a little bit. I just finished driving the Blazer EV SS, and that has 615 horsepower, 650 pound-feet of torque. If that is transferred over, you are going to have an absolute rocket ship over in the Optic. But I have to admit, the Optic felt more fun even than the SS model because the suspension felt tighter, it felt a little bit nimbler. I mean, it felt like it wanted to play, and the Blazer just didn't want to play as much. So if you're telling me you're going to put a more powerful motor setup there in the Optic, I'll admit I like the way the Optic looks. I was not too inspired to say, ooh, I would be really interested in Optic. If you give me a really powerful, really good handling Optic, then you might catch my interest.
I have to applaud Cadillac, though, because Lincoln hasn't given us any EVs, right? And they haven't given us any performance vehicles in a really, really long time either, which does seem a little odd. There's no Aviator V, and that seems, or I don't know what they would even call it, but that seems like the one that would be able to handle the power. It's based on the same rear-wheel drive platform that we see in a number of other vehicles. They could, I don't know, put 500 something horsepower in there, even more, 600 horsepower, something like that. They've just never tried for some reason. And Cadillac has given us a V, everything. All we're waiting for is an Escalade IQV, something along those lines.
Yeah, and that would be, oh God, what would the horsepower number have to be for an Escalade V? IQV,
I would assume
obviously.
I would assume on IQV, they would need to go for the same sort of tri-motor setup that we find in Hummer EV, up there towards 1,000 horsepower, something like that. That could work.
Give me 1,200. Just crank it.
Why not? I mean, the sky is your limit at that point.
But at that point, it would literally take off when you try to launch. Literally take off.
It's so heavy. I don't know what would happen. I think you might just shred so many tires. It might be stupid. But I am here for that kind of world. You know what I'm not quite here for, though, is this photo right here, which is one of the prototype interiors for the new Lexus ES that was launched in China.
There is a lot of screen happening there, and it's screen for the sake of screen, not there should be a screen here doing a certain function.
You know what this reminds me of, especially due to the aspect ratio? This reminds me of like the high functioning people in the early 2000s that were like, my computer can have two screens. I'm going to get a second screen. And Or those commercials where you see people working in the airport and they've got the slide out screen on their laptop.
Slide out, exactly where I was going. It's like the ooh, here it is. And I'd want to be able to put that away because we talked about it before. It's not a secret that neither of us are big fans of the whole passenger screen thing, especially in some like Dodge and Jeep models. This is that times 5. I mean, it's just that much worse. It's not integrated in any way. And second screen aside, if you slide that back, if you didn't tell me that this was a Lexus model, that is not what I would have guessed in the slightest. It would have been 10th or below on my guess of what kind of car this is.
And I'm blaming the steering wheel airbag shape because that looks to me like what a next generation Model S could look like. It's
Okay.
this, the steering wheel shape screams Tesla. The linearity of the dashboard does not scream Lexus in that way.
Yeah.
It is an interesting interior. We are going to get the ES in the United States, everybody. So this is coming, but the two-screen setup is not shown on the North American Lexus website. This picture, which is low res, I apologize to everybody. We cannot get the global PR site from Toyota and Lexus to actually download the image to us, but it is there, and this seems to be one of the options in the Chinese market. Now, the reason this was launched in China is because apparently not only is this the biggest market for the Lexus ES, this is wearing a different crown, and this is why it's not designed for Travis's and my tastes. This is the best-selling imported car in all of China.
Which is a reason you would do something for that specific market, right? I mean, know your brand, know your people. My question here, though, is a bit of an odd one. Not one I think about very often, but what does the airbag do when it's ready to go off? How does that work?
Had that same question. Does it burst through the screen? Is it coming out of that weird little panel just to the right of the air vent?
Do we have a quick
Does it not
retract
have an
system that
airbag?
pulls the screen in? Does it drop from a different spot? What's the story there? Because there's got to be a story.
Yeah, there does not seem to be an answer for this question. I was able to find some pictures, if I can pull these back up, on the North American website. And on the North American website, let me see if I can find it here again. There we go. Cars. Lexus. There we go. Oh yeah.
What's weird is I can
And
see your mouse moving, but it's still only showing the screen share. So it just looks like you're clicking on different areas of the picture. Anyway,
let me add stop screen so we can share, so we can all see this. Here we go. It's just no. Here we go. And 3, 2, 1. They show this picture, which is the North American intended market. Same screen in the dash, but instead of that second screen optionally next to it, you see that there is an airbag opening there. That must be where it pops out on the Chinese market model. I do like the cleanness of this interior, and let me say, you know, in full support of Toyota's design department, this is a very adventurous design for them, unlike anything we've seen from Lexus for a while. I am digging the wood on the doors. We don't know whether it's real or not because Lexus has been moving away from real wood. This just doesn't look like a Lexus to me still. I'm intrigued by the adventurousness, but I don't look at this and think Lexus. I look at this and think if you didn't have that, I would think this is Tesla trying to add a few extra buttons to their model.
it could very easily be the next gen, like I said, Model S. I will say though, and I don't quite know how I feel about it. I like I said, I appreciate that there is some wood in here. There's some different textures. But this actually reminds me a lot of the GX interior, which is very black, very, very squared out, not too expressive. I understand there's kind of a subdued elegance that can go along with things, and I'd hop in this and go, this is nice. But I wouldn't mind a little bit more personality. So as much as I would look at this and not guess that it's Lexus, if I know it's Lexus, it reminds me a lot closer to something like a GX interior, which is quite a departure from kind of the Lexus of old. But we're seeing it happen. But at least we've got a little bit of alternating materials here, not just more black leather or pleather.
They are on the global site. They do show interiors in different colors, some lighter colors. They show ambient lighting, which does look kind of cool. They've got some color changing ambient lighting going on. Those wood panels on the side, those are all illuminated by ambient lighting. And we know that outside the United States, they're going to get something we probably, I would bet, won't see in the US, and that is not just several different flavors of hybrid Lexus ES, they're going to get a battery electric Lexus ES with, according to their Chinese market numbers, about 400 miles of electric range. That is, of course, on the incredibly optimistic driving scale there. If it came here, I would bet it's going to be more like 300 miles. It's not going to charge terribly quickly. It does appear to be some sort of interesting, probably not quite exactly a collaboration with, what is this other company here? Ganzu Toyota Motor Company, apparently. They are the ones that worked on the new BZ7, which we will also see in China. And it appears that the BZ7 and this are going to be relatively closely related. They do seem to share a decent number of elements that we have seen so far. And this is not related as directly to the current generation Camry in the US as before, because this puppy is a lot bigger. And that is the one interesting thing about the Lexus ES. And I hope this does come to the US in this format, because they've increased the ride height and they've stretched the thing by like 6 inches or so. It's over 202 inches long now. And the height increase applies not just to the battery model, which of course raises up because the battery's underneath the body. And that gets a bigger height increase, but the regular hybrid model also has a pretty decent bump up. And that seems to be because the Chinese market likes a big back seat. So I'm kind of wondering, could this be the American, luxury yacht, family sedan thing that we might want?
It could be. I mean, it's kind of getting crownified, right? If you look at a Toyota Crown here in the States, it's a bigger looking sedan. I mean, it's got the sedan shape, but it's higher off the ground. It's a little bit taller.
And why would anybody want a Crown?
Well, because now it's a
after
Lexus.
This.
Right.
After this, why would anybody want a Crown? I'm intrigued.
Pricing, I think, would be a big piece of that puzzle. This is obviously going to come in quite a bit more expensive than we'd find a Crown. But I will say the design on this is interesting. From side profile, it's a lot of cabin, which is great.
Yeah.
Right? You really get the benefit of that. But from the front, I get a weird mix of like GR86, Lexus RZ, and a little bit of Prius in there. It's a interesting amalgamation of all of them.
I am going to be curious to see if Crown continues or if it gets killed off in favor of ES, because if I look at the MSRP now, there is about a $600 or $700 difference between the base MSRP of the Crown and the base MSRP of the Lexus ES. I just don't know why you would want the Crown. Maybe that's why Crown sales haven't exactly been fantastic. Maybe everybody's going, hey, why would you want the Crown?
Yeah, I mean, I would understand maybe dropping the Crown, but the Crown Signia could still have a place, just as the more practical alternative. But yeah, it's a great question.
Sorry if anybody heard any snap, crackle, pop there with some of our audio. We think we have worked through it, and we will now continue the episode with the mind-blowing news that the Chevy Volt is not the best-selling plug-in hybrid in America of all time. It is altogether something different.
No, I mean, at this point, it should be the Prius Prime, right? Because the Volt hasn't been on sale for a while, and the Prius Prime's still going.
No one wants a Prius.
Oh.
I thought it might be a RAV4. RAV4 Prime.
But it is an SUV.
But it is not.
And efficiency is not its key. It is the Jeep Wrangler 4xe. And the 4xe system, not only in the Wrangler, but also the Grand Cherokee, selling very well. Still kind of shocking me that it's top dog.
Yeah, I was surprised. I hadn't paid attention to exactly how the cumulative sales had been going, but apparently Jeep has now built 250,000 Wrangler 4xEs, and I didn't see the total for Grand Cherokee 4xe, but Grand Cherokee 4xe is the second best-selling plug-in hybrid in America. I am surprised. That outsells both generations of the Chevy Volt combined over its approximately decade-long run by 100,000 units. So that is a significant difference, basically almost double the sales in good years compared to good years here. We're talking a lot of Wrangler 4xEs.
We are. Jeep sells a lot of Wranglers, and I'm of the opinion that not everyone who buys a Wrangler needs a Wrangler, but they want it. And the fact that we are pushing a little bit more power and a little bit more, somewhat usable power, and also some more efficiency in the plug-in hybrid variant, great. I mean, it's probably getting close to 50% of their total sales at this point because they're pushing a lot of these 4xEs. And as much as I don't think everyone needs a Wrangler, I will fully admit, put me on the record, Gladiator 4xE would be a real tempting piece of kit because it's just cool. It's just fun and interesting. And I could think of well, I can't really think of anything off the top of my head that would do as many things, check as many boxes as a plug-in Gladiator. But again, in the meantime, people are enjoying their Wranglers and their Grand Cherokee 4xEs.
Now, I don't want to go back and relitigate our Stellantis section because that was last episode.
Fair.
But I will say that with the Wrangler 4xE, there has been a lot of talk and a lot of concern around how many times people are plugging in, etc. The honest answer is we just don't know. We do not have this data for North America, and anybody that tells you otherwise is lying to you. There is a lot of misinformation around or conflation of information around based on European studies on plug-in hybrid vehicles there, that people in Germany rarely plug in their plug-in hybrid, or it's less than 50% of the time, etc.
Right.
The key thing to remember is A, that is not America. B, those are corporate leased vehicles. So you as an employee in your company get a leased vehicle as part of your position, and the company has chosen that you will drive a plug-in hybrid because of whatever mission the company is on, right? Whatever their beliefs are, or tax credits or other things, right?
Exactly.
So they have given you a plug-in hybrid, regardless of your living situation and your choice and your preference. So to try and push that on the American consumer, who, yes, may have a leased vehicle, but generally speaking doesn't, because that's not a thing here in America, that your employer just gives you a car and you don't get to choose, etc.
I mean, mine doesn't.
Company vehicles are a thing. Yeah, company vehicles are a thing, but by and large, people choose their own vehicles, and if you are buying a plug-in hybrid, it's because you want one. So trying to push that data on the other just doesn't make sense. And I think that's why the limited amount of data we do have on plug-in hybrid use is the exact opposite, which was from GM back with the Chevy Volt. And basically, everybody plugged in their Volt all the time, practically. That was the long and short of that data.
I had a roommate here who had a Volt, and that thing was plugged in all the time. And the goal there, especially if you're buying something like a Volt, the reason you get it is for its plug-in hybrid functionality. I can understand there might be some Jeep folks who don't, and maybe it was a better deal, or honestly, maybe they like the blue accents, right? Because people do a lot of silly things for a lot of silly reasons. But the long and short of it is people probably do plug it in. I'm of the opinion they probably plug it in. And I get it, right? We have a data point and people go, oh, here's what's happening. But I think you're right. I'm guessing a lot more people plug in than not.
Yep. And the weird twist about this is a lot of people were super offended that General Motors was sucking up this data. They were sucking up quite a lot of data, and they were tabulating all this information. So other manufacturers chose deliberately not to. And Toyota has said that the way their system is designed currently, yes, theoretically, you could do that in the future, but they did not build into the software and hardware in the vehicle the ability to report on how many miles of electric driving you're doing in their plug-in hybrids. They said they didn't care. It was not something they were interested in. They do not suck up the data. And that's basically the same thing that other car companies have said. And by and large, a lot of these other car companies are correct, especially when you look into the reality that in order to do this, you'd have to have a data connection live on the car all the time, and we just don't. So the average Toyota comes with a few months of their service for free. Outside of that, it's on you to subscribe, so they just don't even have the ability to download that data for the vast majority of their fleet, because it doesn't seem like a huge number of people are actually purchasing those data connectivity subscriptions in that way. So it's an unknown. One would assume that people would, but I would just say focus on you. I don't know why everybody's so obsessed with what other people are plugging in or not plugging in or whatever.
I'll tell you, I think this would be something, and I don't expect we'll see it now or for the time being, but I would expect this would make sense as a government study that says, hey, we want to know these particular habits. And so the government sponsors that data connectivity, but it's limited, right? Make it 3G. make it for cheap, right? We're not trying to do a lot of data streaming. We're just doing some basic data collection, and then tell folks when they buy the new car, hey, we would love to be able to tell, and it says we're going to check how many miles you've driven, and how many miles of those, how often it's been plugged in, and it's all anonymous, and none of it can come back to you, and I think people would contribute to that, especially when you look at early adopters, right? They're excited about this technology. They're tracking everything on their vehicles. I think that would be a great thing to see, and then we would get some of that information, and then we can make some decisions moving forward, and we would learn that people aren't plugging in or are plugging in, and then the EPA says, okay, we're going to change some of these guidelines based on these behaviors. I think that's the way moving forward, but not anytime soon.
Yeah, there's so much difference here, and it's difficult to comment on these things directly in a way, because if you are a Wrangler 4xe owner and you never plug in your 4xe, yes, I would argue you probably should have bought something else. But that said, you get better performance with the 4xe than in the regular 2-liter turbo. So the corollary is not necessarily the 2-liter turbo. It would be some unknown, non-existent engine in the lineup. It's not quite 392 performance, but it's actually pretty close to the 392 in performance and way more fuel efficient. So that's kind of tricky there. If you are looking at the average plug-in hybrid out there, say the Hyundai Kia plug-in hybrids or the Toyota plug-in hybrids, yeah, there's going to be a slight loss in efficiency for getting the plug-in hybrid, but it's a really minuscule loss. The RAV4 Prime versus RAV4, you lose like 1 mile per gallon, and you gain 40 miles of electric range. So even if you plugged it in once a week, you're probably still better off in that emissions-wise, depending on your power blend in your area. And of course, for customers that really do plug it in all the time, they're getting a pretty massive benefit. It's Meeting of the Cats, everybody. Podcast edition. Yeah. Anyway. Down there, little one. Hopefully she'll be quiet. So let's move on, because we must now tackle the tricky subject, which is what we really think of Nissan and going down the list. Yeah. So I want to start, and I like last time, I promise I'm not trying to do all this EV. What is Nissan trying to do with the Nissan Leaf when they already have an Ariya? Because the Leaf looks like it's getting crossoverified, and the Ariya already sits in that place. And unless they're going to shift the Ariya to an Infinity model, which we have talked about, would not be a bad transition for them. What are we doing with the Leaf? It makes sense if GM is going to have a Bolt and an Equinox and a Blazer EV, that Nissan could have a Leaf and an Ariya. I just wish that they actually would build them. And some of their models have been a little expensive. The Leaf was really cheap. The Ariya is a little expensive. Nissan's design language, I think, has been pleasing to the eye. Pricing has always been Nissan's win. And I think that is where they started to go a little bit wrong, is that they were chasing these discount price points, chasing subprime borrowers, just that diminishing return rabbit hole that didn't leave them with the cash to try and improve their lineup and build forward in any way. Nissan does not have a lot of cash around, and they've got a decent amount of debt. They also, of course, got royally effed by Carlos Ghosn and that whole debacle. The purchase of about a third of Mitsubishi probably should never have happened. In a rational world, they probably should have completed the alliance with their French partners and just been one car company, but they could never get all the governments to agree on anything. So they've really been stuck in the middle. Nissan is the Chrysler of Japan, shall we say? Yeah,
the outlook is a little bleak right now. I think that's fair to say. They're dropping. I don't know if they're fully going down, but we know that something needs to change soon. None of the models that we've seen or heard about seem to be the one that are going to bring Nissan back. But I'm hoping there's a solution, right? There was conversation with Honda about partnerships. I'm sure that was the most public, and that one fell through. And I understand why, but disappointing, because I think the more variety we have, the better the competition, the better the product. And Nissan's doing has done and is doing some good stuff. I like the Ariya. It's not the most competitive vehicle, but it's a nice car to drive. The Nissan Z is one of the few sports cars still in the world, right? It's one of the few cars still in the United States. We're all crossovers now. So the fact that there's a sports car is great, and it's made by Nissan. Most everything else is some collaboration or a super long-standing name that never disappeared, right? We have a Corvette, but it's a different world. The Supra, that's a Z4. But they're missing some pieces, and I'm hopeful for Nissan. That's probably all I've got at this point.
Yeah, I think that if I were able to magic wand some things there at Nissan, I think they need to just stick a fork in infinity, call it done, just give up on that puppy. Obviously, that would be expensive with the dealer network, et cetera, but I think that sometimes you may just have to do it, and bankruptcy might be the way to just cut those losses. I think that their choice to leave some of the inexpensive segments is unfortunate, but that we don't have an eye into their books. It may be that it's not cost effective in any way to produce the Versa and some of these other really inexpensive small things, which I think is a shame because inexpensive cars are a good thing for America and for people. And then other than that, I think they just need to really focus on bringing back the brand reputation because they have suffered from their CVT crisis. It appears to be over. We don't have all the data on it. I'm not overly worried about CVTs, but the average customer definitely looks at Nissan and says, okay, it's a good looking car, it's comfortable. The Rogue especially, I think, shows well, but they have these lingering concerns over some of the drivetrain issues. And maybe the solution there is just a broader open partnership with someone. Maybe we ditch the engine and transmission combo and we go back to Toyota like they did once before and just buy some hybrids from Toyota. I mean, wasn't that long ago that Nissan did that. Maybe that's the way back. Speaking of the Toyota connection that keeps coming up, Subaru, 20% owned by Toyota.
Yeah, not a small chunk. And we're seeing some of its technology still in these Subarus, but a little bit less than kind of previously has been. So Subaru as a brand is really strong in my area, right? So I'm in the Northwest, the Northeast also.
Very strong, yeah.
Yeah, and so to me, Subaru is a much bigger brand than it is just because of the frequency in which I see them. But what they've been missing is hybrids, and they now have the Crosstrek and the Forester. Still missing the Outback. That's probably okay for the time being because the Outback has the higher performance models. We still get the XT. But what they are still missing is a plug-in hybrid, and if they are sharing with Toyota, Toyota does have some pretty clever plug-in hybrid systems. But I think Subaru's in a good place right now. My biggest gripe, which we've talked about, is probably that the Outback is getting slightly less wagony, but Subaru's in a good place.
Subaru is one of the fastest growing car companies in America, and I just wonder, how many more lumbersexuals are we creating in America that are justifying this growth of Subaru? Because it is an interesting rise. Subaru struggled for so long, and then all of a sudden, somehow, they hit on this, urban hipstery vibe that doesn't actually translate to, that's not who's actually buying it, right? But that's the impression. Like society says a Subaru buyer, wears flannel. I mean, I guess wears this, and then, goes camping every week and bicycles.
With their two dogs.
Their data does indicate, though, that their customers are more likely to be pet owners, and they are more likely to do outdoorsy things, not necessarily off-road, but they do things outside more often than others. I am just super curious to see how did this Subaru connection really happen? Because they lean into it really well with a product line that is not as varied as the competition. So I would have thought that maybe Subaru shoppers would have been tired of seeing the same interior design in everything, the same engine, same transmission in everything. But it does not seem to affect the customer.
No, and changes to the technology are not the first thing Subaru owners want. They just a lot of folks are saying, "Hey, I just want the newer version of what I had," and that plug and play does not work for every brand. Yep. Some brands are going to be much more forward in their leaps and bounds, and Subaru says we have symmetrical all-wheel drive, and people go, "Excellent, done. Glad that's still there. I'll take the Subaru." So I mean,
Yeah.
whatever the formula is, I think they've kind of nailed it as far as how do you keep moving forward in a way that's not terribly expensive, because they are not a terribly large company, and they've
Yeah.
leveraged their partnerships well.
And I think part of the reason I think is that they have done okay being this small company where others have failed, is that they are really designing everything with incredible high amounts of commonality. Like even this new Outback has a lot of parts shared with all the other things, even though it's the next generation this and next generation that. There's still a lot that is shared, and certainly more than we find in much smaller companies out there like Mazda, et cetera, that have, are definitely having more of a financial concern. Moving on, speaking of financial concern in America, we have Volkswagen, Audi, Porsche, which is, remember everybody, all the same company. So it's all Volkswagen. Audi is definitely having some issues lately in the United States. Their sales have never been on a roll, but now they have stopped almost everything at the port because they're like, can't handle the tariffs. That's not going to work. Volkswagen, I honestly, I don't know. We've talked about this before. I don't know what's wrong with Volkswagen, and I don't know, could it ever be fixed? Because we don't know what's wrong. They keep doing what American customers claim they want from Volkswagen. We want discount Audi, we want just super cheap car, we want this, we want that, and you can see that over the last few decades, Volkswagen has turned the ship around and like, okay, well we'll give them crappier Jettas that are little rattle boxes and they're super cheap and they're just for America. We'll give them an Audi platform shared Jetta. No, that didn't work either, right? And so now we're trying the Buzz. We tried some EVs. ID4's moment, I think, has started to sunset. Buzz, there are only going to be so many customers interested in the Buzz, even though I think it's fantastic.
Well, and
So
affordability
I'm at a
is
loss.
piece of the puzzle
Yeah.
there. We're also losing the manual transmissions that people have loved in your
Yeah.
Jettas and your Golfs. GTIs and Rs are only in automatic. And there's a performance piece, I understand, but you also look at Civic, and the Civic Si is still manual only. And so they just, unless you get an Integra.
Yeah.
But my point stands, right? They've just kind of gone away from some of these pieces. And I don't know. I've always liked Volkswagen from afar, but it's never been the direction I go personally. And we need to see something new to bring them forward. And yes, the Buzz is part of it, but the Buzz is not that different from bringing back the Beetle, and there's just limited reach there.
It is limited reach, but I'm glad they did it. We have solid charging in the Buzz. Maybe a camper Buzz might bring back some extra nostalgia, but
But you have to have a
honestly, I just-
follow-up model
Yeah.
to make to someone says, "Oh, I see the Buzz. Oh, Volkswagen," and then they go look at
Yeah.
one. So you got to have something in that category.
Yeah, but like Volkswagen Atlas, it's in a really popular category. I think it should sell better than it does. It's really practical, very family friendly, big and boxy in the back. I think it looks good. The touch controls on the dashboard, they're not the greatest, but it's not a deal breaker for a lot of people because there's some way stupider controls and other things. It's not like that's the only dumb control out there. I'm just always curious. Move along to BMW, and I have long said that BMW is the new Mercedes because they're the ultimate marketing machine, not necessarily the ultimate driving machine.
And they're doing a lot. I mean, from still having small cars available to having enormous SUVs. Diesel's obviously not as popular as it was, but they have plug-in hybrid models. They have performance models. They're doing a lot across the board. And as much as I am not generally speaking a luxury brand person, like it's not where I would go shopping. When I spent time in that i4, which is a compromised EV, right? It's wedged between two worlds. I went, this is still a fantastic car, compromise or not. And I think they're going strong. I would love to see a little bit of the quirkiness that we saw a couple years ago. I'm probably on record as loving the i3. I also really like the i8 conceptually. It's just interesting. It's different. We don't see that right now. I don't think we need to, but in the next few years, I'd like to see something a little bit funky. But yeah, BMW's in a good place, and I'm glad to see that they're transitioning some of their models. They're doing adjacent. So you have the 7 Series and the i7s, and you have the 5 Series and the i5s. I think they're bringing those things together in a good way.
Yeah, they have a really nice engine lineup. I think that's BMW's best asset is that they make really great inline 6 engines. They make solid four-cylinder engines and nice V8s as well. But the inline sixes are really the meat of their market, and it has been for quite some time.
You've got
And
one in
then
the
they've
driveway
wrapped
right now.
them- yeah, and they've wrapped them into a form factor that is pleasing and comfy. But that's the thing that I do find funny, is that there is still a significant portion of the BMW audience that thinks they are the best handling everything. And I'm like, they handle really nicely, and I love me a BMW to drive, but they're also daily driver livable. They're not the ultimate in a lot of ways. If I'm looking for the sharpest handling, mainstream entry in that segment, it's going to be something like the Alpha that you have. I mean, that handling is much better than the corresponding BMW in the lineup cost-wise. The rear-wheel drive Cadillacs have always done really well there. Even a Lexus IS feels better around a track than a BMW 3 Series. But BMW gives you that whole luxury package and then a whole lot of power, so that way you're really quick. And I think that it seems to work better. But it is funny that there's this like, oh, they're the ultimate here. And that's where I say, well, they're a really great luxury car, but BMW is a little bit more the ultimate marketing machine than the ultimate driving machine.
Yeah, and for listeners who picked up on it, I do not own an Alpha. I've got an Alfa Romeo Stelvio here in the driveway this week. But I agree. They've just put together the package that hits the mark. It was actually a conversation I had with folks driving the Blazer EV SS who said, this isn't made for the track. Where's the sportiness? Where's the handling? Ioniq 5N. And I said, yes, but you don't want to drive the Ioniq 5N in the same way, the same distances, the same frequency as you'd want to drive this. So I think they've found a good balance, which is a good, competent suspension that you can tighten up or loosen up, depending on your different models. But it's great for your 7/10ths driving, your 8/10ths driving. If you want more, you have to sacrifice some of that comfort that most BMW owners probably are not willing to, at least not the first owners.
And that leads me to our next one, which is if BMW is the new Mercedes, what is Mercedes? And I would posit that Mercedes has been, especially over the last decade or so, especially though since the breakup with Chrysler, Mercedes has been really trying to reposition their brand further up the luxury ladder, so that way they're less associated with the BMWs and the Audis in the market. And I think that they have really done that quite well, because their transaction prices are insanely high. The average Mercedes model goes for significantly more than the corresponding competitive BMW or Audi, not to mention Lexus. I mean, we're talking practically double the MSRPs on the Lexus side. I mean, to the point where we have bonkers price tags. The CLE that we have in the driveway right now for review, $97,000, doesn't even have a heated steering wheel.
Okay, that one's surprising. They also have some, more affordable models, so they are still trying to draw people in, right, big air quotes. But they're trying to draw people in to this brand. But at this point, if they're trying to step above your BMWs and your Audis, then how much closer they get into something like Maybach, which is their own their own sphere. They're not close enough for it to be a problem, but they also do have a number of AMG models. I mean, you can AMG nearly anything within the lineup, so you can get the higher performance version of this vehicle you already like. So I think that's why Mercedes owners are going to keep going back to Mercedes, because they've got a bigger version, they got a smaller version, they have a more powerful version, they have a more sensible they have just done a really good job of making sure that palette is covered for folks coming in.
Now, just in case anybody thinks that we're just blowing smoke up these luxury car company skirts because they give us shrimp cocktail or something like that, that is not the case. And here's where I think Mercedes has gone wrong. Their pricing is bonkers. So if you're looking at a GLA or a GLB, you can get those puppies up over $70,000. So you may start adjacent to Volvo and BMW, but holy shit, they get really expensive. Also, if I were to wave a magic wand, if we're back in the magic wand business, and one thing that I would change at Mercedes, I would just tell them stop designing your own stop designing your own automatic transmissions. Mercedes automatics are not great. I do not like any of them more than a competitive transmission in the segment. Their 9-speed automatic transmission's not great. Mercedes has tried the MCT thing where they're like, we don't want to do a dual clutch, so we're going to take a regular automatic, we're going to delete the thing that makes it good, which is the torque converter, and we're going to jam one clutch in there. Not great. Their dual clutch transmissions in their smaller vehicles, also a little herky-jerky. I think they should just buy a ZF automatic like everybody else and just, roll with that one. Just much better transmissions. They make fantastic engines, though, like the E53, CLE 53's 3-liter engine with the electric supercharger and turbo on there. That's a fantastic design. Lots of power, sounds great, it's really smooth. Transmission just a little bit funky there. But at the same time, in a way, it seems like a Mercedes customer expects this uniqueness, this like engineering side where Mercedes is designing their own transmissions and their own everythings inside their vehicle. But if I could wish, I think I would wish that they ditch the transmission designing.
And I'll admit, like I said, luxury cars are not where I am gravitated towards personally, but I did see for the first time a Mercedes AMG 1, and that was there are very few cars that I really, at this point, stop and go, oh my goodness, and that was absolutely one of them. No chance to take it for a spin, but looking at it was a treat.
And I will say somewhat controversially that their 4-cylinder plug-in hybrid performance AMG drivetrain, that is a thing of magic. Oh my God. It is so insanely fast.
What a ride.
The sound, the funky sounds that it makes, the driving nature of it, the fact that they have made a plug-in hybrid that can deliver this much power and this much bonkersness, especially with the funky 2-motor transmission in the back with, 2-speed transmission with the motor in the back. Like, oh, that is a weird setup that they've got going on there that is all kinds of interesting. Also all kinds of interesting is the odd conglomerate that is Geely, but we're only talking about one portion of it because America here. So we're talking about Volvo and Polestar, but we should mention that Geely, who is the owner of 80% of Volvo and almost all of Polestar, also owns Proton, Lotus, London Taxi Company, Link & Company, Zeekr, 50% of Smart, 10% of Mercedes-Benz, and it's worth noting that another 10% of Mercedes is owned by BAIC, and Chairman Li Shifu has his intent on owning a controlling share of Mercedes. So, who knows when the Germans will be in the Geely party, but we're focusing on the Volvo and Polestars of this.
And right now, between those two, and actually a lot of these brands, Polestar is the one that I think is on a really interesting track, but one that I'm generally down with. Spent time with both the Polestar 3s, Polestar 2, not currently available for sale in the United States unless it was already in inventory due to tariffs. That's a bit of a shame. I want to see a new Polestar 2, but we won't. So that's just my little dream, and we'll let it go by the wayside. But the naming conventions are bizarre, and you've spent some time with the Polestar 4. I have not yet. Looking forward to it soon. But that Polestar 3 is such a compelling vehicle. And related to the EX90, which is the more practical, but still also compelling vehicle, they're making a second wave, and it's probably tied in with some of this ownership and some of the direction they're willing, interested, or are able to spend cash and go down. But Volvo is growing pretty quickly here in the United States, and Polestar, having run off on their own, is still, they're running a similar race, but they're going off to the side, and I think that Polestar 3 is a nice car to drive.
I really like the Polestar 3, I have to admit, and it's not as expensive as I had expected it to be, because in this conglomerate, Polestar is the one that's supposed to go after Porsche. Volvo is the one that's supposed to compete with Audi and BMW. That's the theoretical logic here. But not in the performance sense. So Volvo's targeted for mainstream competition with the other luxury companies. But then I will remind everybody out there that Volvo's trajectory and plan is very different than some of the other car companies. The reason they have 4-cylinder engines only, the reason they're going all electric in relatively short order, although they've dialed that back a bit, is that America is not their largest market. And that is very different than a lot of the other luxury brands that are sold in America, where we are a significant market, the largest or second largest market for all the other luxury car companies out there, for instance. With Volvo, America is the third largest market. So Europe and then China are much bigger, and they're growing more rapidly than Volvo's market in America. And I know Volvo hates it when I say it this way, but you know, Volvo has to care less about this market. And they're like, oh, we care about every market. Sure, sure, sure. Like you care about your 15th child the same as you did your first. Okay, sure. That's judgy, but hey, there we are. This is the podcast, so
I'm
we
a
can do this.
firstborn. It's fine.
So it is obvious, I think, when you look at their lineup that is absolutely not true. Because if it was true, we would still have 5-cylinder engines, 6-cylinder engines. They would have figured out a way to keep the V8, right? They would be focusing more on gasoline engine development than they are, and that is just not the case because that's not where their majority of sales are, right? Their majority of sales are in a market where you need a smaller engine, you need a strong electric portfolio, plug-in hybrids are favored, and that's why they've got some really great plug-in hybrids and significant portions of sales there, even though the American market is not a huge market for plug-in hybrids. Volvo's sales in some of their established areas in the US, like California, it's about 50% plug-in hybrid for a lot of their models.
And basically half of their models have the plug-in hybrid option. So it's kind of the one-off.
Yeah.
So like the V90 doesn't, but you have an XC60 and XC90. The S60, I believe, still does. I'm not sure the S90.
I mean, it's dead now, but
yeah.
S60 is dead. S90's been canceled for America because of where it was built, so that's a problem.
Yeah, but
XC40,
there's so many
plug-in
ways.
hybrid.
No, and that's the one that's missing. But those recharges, as they the
but then there's an electric
XC40
one.
is now the EX40, right? And then the C40 is now the EC40. Those are great little vehicles to drive. Obviously, we have our C40 Recharge that I've spent a lot of time with. Not great for road tripping, but great to drive around town.
Yeah, it's a solid car. If I were, to say what could be fixed or what could be better at this car company thing, I still do not quite understand why Polestar exists as a separate company. I think it's weird. Maybe it made sense in other markets. I don't get the impression that it really truly makes that much sense in the US. The logic supposedly is if Polestar is going to go after Porsche and after these high performance customers, and Volvo wants no deaths. Yeah, and Volvo wants no deaths in a car, and they're going to limit your speed to 100 and something miles an hour, 113, I think, miles an hour. Then these priorities are divergent, and we can't really do the same thing in the same brand. Whatever. Okay. I still think, how much better could this have been if you had spent the literally tens of billions of dollars on Polestar instead on some new Volvos? I think that could have been better, but what do I know?
And there's only one Polestar model on for sale right now, so that's a weird. But it's a weird spin-off.
But when you look at this trajectory, though, what does Polestar cost? The existence of Polestar, what does it cost Volvo? It cost Volvo the C40 sedan, or the S40 sedan rather, because the Polestar 2 was the S40 at the beginning of its life. It cost Volvo the flagship hybrid electric coupe, which was the Polestar 1, because that was supposed to have been a C90. That was absolutely gorgeous. That would have been a really cool flagship. And logically, it also cost Volvo the Polestar 3. I don't know exactly how that would have slot in the lineup because that didn't really exist at the time of the breakup. But, we have a Mercedes-Benz GLE and a BMW X5. XC90 is the dedicated 3-row thing, but the GLE is the 2-row, and the X5, the GLE and X5, they're primarily 2-row, differently sized and differently laid out from XC90. But that could have been Volvo's answer to that. That could have been, I don't know, an XC something, XC80. I don't know.
I would say call it the EC90, right? You say, hey, it's similar, but it's the coupe version, obviously not a 3-row. Yeah, I don't know. It's okay. In the grand scheme, you're right, the finances I don't think make a lot of sense to me, especially because the styling is very similar. If you pop badges off and you ask anybody on the street, are these the same brand? People will say yes.
Yeah, they look very Volvo.
Yeah.
Polestar 3 looks a little bit divergent. Polestar 4, I do not understand why it doesn't have a rear window, because all the explanations do not hold water. They're just stupid. They're like, oh, well, this and the hatch design and whatever, and you're like, okay, but you could have put glass where you have this silly panel, just had a window. I don't know. We'll see if it becomes a thing.
Just
we'll see if it turns into a thing. I don't know. But yeah, the important thing to remember with Volvo that I caution people all the time with is that, they are going to have the European car repair costs and reliability, differences that you see in most European brands, but they are going to have a different driving experience. So Volvos don't drive like BMWs or Audis or Mercedes, etc. They march to their own little drummer. I find that somewhat refreshing, but it is something that people need to know. I have a soft spot for Volvo. But I wish that there were different decisions made, more of an American focus, which probably not rational, et cetera, and the things we talked about. Let's move along to Mazda, the other one that definitely causes some divided opinions.
Well, and this is another one of those Toyota partnership ownership situations, but the way they've integrated with that is different. And it's, Mazda is a small company, right? And again, you look at their cars, and I think they're successful in what they're doing. And I think the average consumer doesn't consider the fact that they sell so many less units than other manufacturers. That's not the way I ever looked at it. But when you look at all the partnerships they've had over the years, right? Ford was a big one. Now with Toyota, the models are different, but we have a plug and play, a copy paste from the RAV4 Prime, or excuse me, from the RAV4 Hybrid into the CX-50 Hybrid. And it's an interesting way to do it, because on the surface, it's still Mazda. Where previously on the surface it was some of whatever these partnerships were. I think specifically the B trucks, which were Rangers. But now you say, hey, here's a Mazda experience, but powered by Toyota.
Mazda's an interesting one because they're not as owned by Toyota as Subaru. So Toyota owns 20% of Subaru. Toyota owns 5% of Mazda. So they're much more on their own, much smaller budgets. And this is another one of those areas where maybe they shouldn't be doing all this R&D themselves. Like they designed supposedly their new 8-speed rear-wheel drive transmission on their own. It does suspiciously look like an Aisin transmission from the cutaways that I've seen, but I can't confirm nor deny. If it is an Aisin, good for them. If it is their own transmission, holy shit, what were they thinking? Mazda has troubles affording to build the lineup that they have promised already, let alone, actually building their own transmissions and designing it. Why are we wasting the money when you can just buy a perfectly good transmission from an established transmission company? That I don't understand. The CX-90 and CX-70, I think, are a bit of a disappointment. CX-90 because they missed the opportunity to make it a higher performance, elevated experience, and it's kind of caught between worlds because it's very Mazda inside. The mild hybrid system is herky-jerky because it lacks a torque converter, so same problem that we find in some of the Mercedes models for the same exact reason, only without the, cash to try and smooth it out design-wise. CX-70, I think, is really disappointing because it's just a CX-90 with a third-row delete. And that's not what we had really been promised. The going into this, that they were going to have this new rear-wheel drive platform, they said it would spawn 4 models, and that we would see a big and a small model in Europe, we'd see a big and a small model in America. What I don't understand is if they couldn't make the 4th model work financially, the reduced size one for the US, why not just grab the CX-80 or the CX-60 from Europe, bring that over here because it's already there?
I think the biggest miss for me on the CX-90 70 situation is that the 70 in theory I think that should be the higher performance one because it's leaning into not being the family hauler or the bigger family hauler, but it's nice to drive, but it's also relatively tight. What I think the miss on the CX-90 is that it's too
big
tight
on the outside.
We're getting the same driving dynamics as the 70, and I go, this is the family hauler. Lean into that. Give us a softer suspension. Make it more comfortable to drive because if you're doing a longer road trip and that road gets nasty, as much fun as you had carving the back roads, you are going to end up paying for it because these are not trick suspensions in any way.
Right.
And I don't mind. You look at cars, something like a Passport, which has room for 5 people and quite a bit of stuff. It's still a bigger vehicle. A Grand Cherokee, kind of the same thing. That's where the CX-70 falls into as a larger 2-row SUV. I don't think it's a problem, but but it's just so obvious that it's just minus the rear seats, that if they could have done something a little bit different, a little more variation in the body, even if it's a kit, right? Put on a lip, put on a spoiler, put on something, lower it a little bit. Just give us some differentiation. I understand sharing models and parts and those sorts of things, but a little farther a gap would be beneficial. The last thing for me, with tariffs and with the changes in fuel economies and requirements, I'm really worried about the Miata, the MX-5.
Yeah. Who knows where the tariffs will be, but Mazda's in a world of hurt tariff-wise because they really don't build anything in the United States, and they have very low North American parts content, except for the CX-50, which is built in coordination with Toyota in the United States. Everything else is built in Japan. The MX-5 Miata has a very low margin because of its unique design and the fact that it shares relatively little with the rest of the Mazda family. The unfortunate problem, I think, also is that Mazda has lost the edge on the sportiness side of things. That used to be their tagline, Zoom Zoom, and they used to really lean into that. They had Mazda Speed models, they had a Speed 3, a Speed 6, etc. They were known for being fun to drive. And I would say that, by and large, a lot of that fun to driveness and that elegant suspension design that we had come to associate with Mazda, especially that part, is simply lost in all of their small vehicles because they ditched the independent rear suspension. And they will try and justify it up, down, and sideways. But if you drive a Mazda 3 and pretty much any of the independent suspension competition on the average road surface in a fun to drive area, like the roads that are just on the other side of that window there, the roads we drive on all the time, high speed limits, nice winding roads, really nicely banked curves, but the pavement's less than perfect. So, there's some bumps, there's some ripples, etc. The suspension in the 3 just gets upset, and the rear end starts squirming around, and it's just not as well stuck down as, an Elantra, a hybrid Elantra with the independent suspension in the back is more settled in the rear. And that fills me with sadness that they went in that direction. It's a logical direction to go because it's less expensive and it allows parts commonality with the other models, slightly bigger cargo area, etc. But it is sad that those core models have lost that. And maybe that's why CX-5 still sells so well. That's the other weird thing, is that Mazda is very unique in the US in that one model accounts for the lion's share of sales. It's, depending on the month you're talking about, it could be over half of all Mazda sales in North America is the CX-5, the oldest model in their lineup.
I mean, the only thing that kind of sparks that in my mind is actually Mitsubishi with the Outlander, and that one's interesting because it's their most expensive model. The question I have for you, and there's a kind of a two-parter, if you could bring back a model from Mazda or speedify a model, which would you like to do, and which do you think would be better for the company?
I would like to see the Mazda 6 that we were promised resurrected from the grave, because I think that would be cool. If they could create obviously they'd have to get a new transmission because the one they've got not right. But if they could give us a Mazda 6 mid-size Camry-sized sedan with that 380 horsepower inline 6 and just snag a transmission from Aisin or ZF, that would be fantastic, because there is no such thing as a driver's sedan in that category. We're losing them left, right. Yep. I think that the Chrysler group of companies, which I know it's Stellantis, but it's just for simplicity's sake, it's easier to call them Chrysler in North America. Chrysler proved that there was a market for rear-wheel drive, fun-to-drive sedans. The number of V8s that they sold in Charger Challenger, astronomical. There is this fallacy that the average Charger is a V6 rental car. That was not true when you look at the sales. Like, the V8s were the majority of the collectively, the 3 V8s outsold the 6-cylinder by quite a big margin, because that's what customers are interested in. And I would have loved to have seen what Mazda could do with that, because it would be so unique. They would have the segment entirely to themselves, and that could help reinvigorate the Zoom Zoom brand part. I think rationally, the thing that could help them would be to simply bring the 60 from Europe, because why is it? the divergence of the lineup didn't really make sense to me for a company that's this small. Mazda's a very small company, mind you. They've got the one factory, the one shared with Toyota, but basically every Mazda is made in one factory. Very, very, very small company internationally. Why did we create a platform and then two separate SUVs for Europe, one for the US and then one with a delete? Like, I think it would have just made more sense to bring CX60 to the US or CX80 and CX90. Like, let's have two of them here. Pick one, just choose one. I think their concern was that CX60 is too close in size to CX5, but you know what? That's fine. Delete CX5. Let's have us a CX60.
Or would you delete the CX70
Mazda,
because that would sort of fill a gap?
Well, definitely that should never have existed. I mean, that should just be euthanized. But I think Mazda is in a good place because the customers are enthusiastic still about the product. They look fantastic. I mean, Mazda's design has aged incredibly well. This Kodo design philosophy that they've had for a while, whether we're talking about some of the early Kodos or the current ones, I think they look fantastic. So the looks aren't a problem. The customer base isn't the problem. They're just not giving the customers seemingly what they're wanting.
Yeah, and they are some of the best looking cars out there, especially for the price point. I think I would like to see a Mazda 6 come back, but I'm worried about where the actual impact on the sales would be. So yes, like a CX60 would be a better call, but I can't help but wonder what a nice Mazda Speed 3 would look like. I mean, that would I think it'd be a great segment. I would kind of hate to see a Mazda Speed CX50 or Speed CX50 something like that. It break my little heart just a little bit. I want to see the cars, not the SUVs, get the performance bump. But either way, we'll see how things change because they don't have a lot of, as we see with their implementation on the CX50, they don't have a lot of hybrid options. They don't have any plug-in hybrids. Well, they have the CX70 and the 90, but they don't have any smaller plug-in hybrids at the moment. And new powertrains are expensive to R&D.
Yeah. And that's why we have Mitsubishi the way they are. Mitsubishi is now 24% owned by Nissan, so they've actually sold some of the shares back to Mitsubishi themselves. Mitsubishi, I understand the least in America because they're practically a one-car lineup. I know they have other models on sale, but let's be honest, it's just the Outlander that people are buying.
Almost 50% of sales are Outlander.
Yeah. The one model, and it's understandable because it's an okay looking thing. The interior is nice. It's the Rogue. I mean, it's just a Rogue, and I honestly think that that's probably the best solution for Mitsubishi is just lean into this Nissan deal, create some better strategic partnership rather than trying to be separate, and just rebadge some more Nissans.
I mean, at the moment, I don't think anyone's clamoring for an Eclipse Cross. I will say they are doing one thing maybe extra right, and they're leaning into the new off-roading, soft-roading craze. So we are getting the Outlander. Oh gosh, I can't remember the model name, but it comes with a great graphics. No, it's not I don't think it's a Rally Art. I'd have to look that up. But anyway, it's got a great graphics package. It's got some interior bits. It's got all the accessories that people are looking for. So that's just another offering, and it's not too different than a Rock Creek type edition, which obviously is very Nissan. But what else are we doing with Mitsubishi? You want to talk about
the Outlander Sports Trail Edition?
There we go. Yeah,
it's the Outlander Sport Trail,
not Trail Sport, right?
Yes, Sport Trail.
Very different. Very different. We're just. That's a company that's hanging on. Nissan is on its way down. Mitsubishi is just hanging on the edge.
Just clinging on.
But I'll admit, I really do like the Outlander for the dollar.
Yeah. Now we must dive into the newbies, of course. And we'll quickly go through these sort of in order. Not all the newbies. There are lots of car companies out there. But let's talk Lucid first. Lucid, of course, has a two-model lineup now with the Air and the Gravity. They are primarily underwritten by the Saudi Wealth Fund, and they've got other investors here and there, but they are the manufacturer that's really pushing efficiency and engineering on the drivetrain, charging especially. The Gravity is the fastest charging EV outside of China. But they are pushing very expensive models with no seeming sign of profitability anytime soon.
No, you can only do that when you've got a bankroll behind you, and they do. So this is one of those companies that is beyond vaporware at this point. We're not talking about a Fisker situation, but they are, and they move past like a Karma as far as they're really producing cars that some people can afford. But it really is the Tesla model, and this is exactly one and two, right? They have the Air, which is their Model S, and they have the Gravity, which is their Model X. I don't think there has been much talk about a Model 3 or Model Y competitor. They don't need it right now, but they really are pushing the boundaries on efficiency and performance and, like I said, engineering. And it's some pretty incredible stuff. I'll admit I've only had, I don't know, 15, 20 minutes behind the wheel of a Lucid Air, and I don't remember off the top of my head which model it was. It was not the highest performance one, but give me a rear-wheel drive one of those, and I will be a happy camper. The shape and the design is a little bit funky, but but it's a good car. I mean, there's no two ways around it. It is a good car.
I'm not the biggest fan of the shape of either or the UI on the infotainment system, but the motors and the battery designs are very, very intriguing. And I am a little surprised. Maybe other companies haven't been interested, but I would love to see Lucid selling battery and motor tech to other companies, because that I think would be a super cool tie-up, especially companies like Mercedes somehow. I think that type could work.
Yeah, I think if I'm not mistaken, they're partnered with Formula E. So I think they are selling some powertrain components to Formula E, which makes perfect sense, right? It's one of the things they're doing very well, and I don't think there's a ton of high performance EV tech out there. But
that's not exactly another car company. The closest thing we have is they have announced a partnership with Aston Martin, and Aston Martin's not on this list because they're a very, very, very microscopically small car company that is owned by basically venture capital at the moment. So that kind of makes sense that they're exploring that kind of partnership.
Right.
But I would like to see more of a mainline partner with Lucid. Like I want to see, what could we do if there's a battery tech cross partnership, cross pollination between, Mercedes or BMW or Audi and Lucid, something like that. What would this be like if?
Yeah, I think Mercedes is probably the dream partner, because Audi and Porsche, they already have a lot of EV development stuff going on. It would maybe not be surprising, but it would be. They've already put a lot of money into it.
They all have a lot of really interesting EV tech in their lineup. All three of those, the Volkswagen Group, BMW, and Mercedes. Obviously, it's not that Mercedes is behind in electrification at all, because they've got a lot of dedicated platform EVs that charge really nicely as well. I'm just wondering, what could you do with this combination of the Mercedes affluent customer and the high price tags there and the AMG names and some of the things that we see at Lucid? That could be an interesting pairing. But Mercedes doesn't like to pair because things haven't always gone well in their past.
No, I mean, there's the I'm thinking there's the McLaren partnership, right? Was that the SLR McLaren, something like that? I mean, they've dabbled before. Thinking more like the Chrysler purchase that didn't go exactly to plan. No, Lucid would be a different animal.
Yeah. One pairing that is ramping up, though, is the Rivian Volkswagen partnership. And Rivian is an interesting one because Rivian has suffered from, I think, a lot of bad press, not directly associated with Rivian, but because other EV startups have gone belly up. And then everybody looks at Rivian and goes, oh my God, they're losing so much money, there's a problem here. But the amount of cash that Rivian had from the big investments they had at the beginning, I think always, and I've said this before, in the past, there's really not much of a concern with Rivian as an ongoing concern because they have so much money and so many resources that a lot of the cash burn that we were seeing that was concerning everybody about a year or two ago, that was due to the design and the R&D process spinning up for these other models in the lineup and the refresh of R1S and R1T, which were very expensive. And so I think that their trajectory has a lot of hope. more hope than some of these others. Like there's more of a profitability plan certainly at Rivian than at Lucid at this point in time. Will they continue to get the resources that they need for that, the money in? We don't know, but their partnerships with companies like Volkswagen definitely seem to indicate that there's a lot of cash promised.
Yeah, they started off strong with the likes of Amazon and Ford, and the delivery van business has been doing well for them. And it's a test bed, it's a steady stream of income, it's more reliable. And now that some of that exclusivity with folks like Amazon is over, folks can reach out and start to add ADVs to their own fleet. So that's going to be a big push. As long as that stays solid, and hopefully people are interested. There are some competitors. GM has Bright Drop, and I know Ford has some e-transits. But as they transition from the ones to the twos, right, the R1s to the R2, that's going to be a big moment for them. It's still a little ways down the road, but from what we've seen, and we've seen a couple of those rolling prototypes. I mean, they drive, but they're not meant to be driven at the moment. I think that's going to be an absolute hit. My biggest thing is how do you continue to stand out from the rest of the market? And they're sort of doing not Bronco Sport, but like a baby Bronco thing with this R2.
Yep.
And but they're going to do it lower scale, so it doesn't sound like air suspension is going to be something that comes out standard. That's good for affordability. You have a super boxy design, so you get all the practicality that comes with it. I'm thinking that you get a lot of Subaru owners who might be going, oh, I'm looking from my Forester or my Outback. What's the electric option? It might be that, although obviously Subaru does have a couple electric options coming out. Well, they can be competitive with something like a Rivian because I think that's where a lot of the cross shop is.
Yeah, I mean, we are seeing a decent number of people moving from Jaguar, Land Rover, Jeep, and Ford to Rivian, specifically the R1S. R1T seems to be some customers that already had a pickup truck, but a lot of new truck shoppers as well in that segment. And I think Rivian's done a better job of creating a good electric truck, much better, I would say, than Tesla at creating a brand new electric truck in the marketplace and delivering on a lot of the promises. It took a while. We did finally get the Max Pack. It wasn't exactly what we were promised. It's a little smaller than the Max Pack we were promised, but we do have pretty solid range in that model. Over 400 miles range, depending on the version you get. You can get 2 motors, 3 motors, 4 motors. The performance is absolutely bonkers. They have been continually improving. So that was the one thing I was worried about was, are they going to be able to do this Tesla-like software roll all the time to continually improve their vehicles? And it does appear that Rivian is dedicated to it. You know, we are seeing very regular software updates a la Tesla. They're really the only other car company out there that's doing it quite that well. Volvo is doing a relatively good job, as is Polestar, but not with the regularity and frequency that we see in Rivian, and certainly not with the added feature updates that we see in the Rivian lineup and with Tesla, where whole new features have been cooked up rather than just delivering on promises that were missing at the beginning. I think the interesting part there really will be how does this success with these expensive models translate into the cheaper models?
And again, the cheaper models just can't come soon enough. The R2, I mean, what was interesting is they announced the R3 and the R3X at the same time as the R2, and people were so excited. I mean, myself included. It's like, hey, that's something I'd be really interested in, but it was never available for sale. I mean, it's down the road. I don't think it's a vaporware thing, but it was a don't get me excited about something before the next thing comes out. But I think they might have been worried about, we need to make sure people are still interested in us. We need to make sure that the eyes are there. And then it was shortly after that this partnership with Volkswagen was announced, and it still remains unclear how that's going to pan out and what sort of involvement there is. But I'm going to be guilty of this one. I saw the Scout reveal, and I looked at those interiors, and I said, those are pulled straight from Rivian. Just one for one. Those seats, those dash, the displays, and not in a bad way. But I was thinking that these conversations take a while. But that partnership was announced pretty close to the reveal of those vehicles, and I was like, I wonder what those interiors looked like 6 months to a year ago as they were being designed, and if there has been some changes made in the very short term.
The claim has been that they are not sharing parts with Rivian. That's been the claim. So I I am intrigued to see A, if that's actually true, and B, if it is true, then why is the interior a solid, at least homage to the Rivian lineup? Is that, it could be that that's just what customer focus groups wanted. They see the Rivian, they're like, I want an adventure vehicle, it's electric, and this is what that one looks like, so I want something like this, etc. But you know who doesn't have an adventure vehicle and has been having some, let's just say, sales stumbles lately is our last competitor here in the lineup, and that would, of course, be Tesla.
What do you mean they don't have an adventure vehicle? There are lift kits for the Model Y, the X has an air suspension, and don't forget the Cybertruck.
Sure.
Yeah. And don't worry, lots of people forget the Cybertruck. That's why they are sitting on lots. Tesla, just the other day, again, we're filming this part 2 just a couple days after part 1. Thanks for hanging in here with us. The Tesla saga continues and sales are down, margins are down, profit is down. The company has still made money, but not as much because of the cars it sold.
Yeah, and down pretty significantly, especially in markets like Europe, which is, I think, more my concern is that some of their markets that had historically been doing really well, they're falling very dramatically in. Obviously, some of this is politics, which I will let everybody out there decide on their own personal politics. But I will just say that Elon Musk's personal politics do not appear to align with his customers' personal politics, and how he missed that, I do not understand. I don't get it. I've always had the suspicion that Elon is not necessarily bright. He's just dog with a bone, and he just really goes at the thing until he gets what he wants. And this maybe is proving that. I don't know. I don't have windows into his soul or anything like that. But I will say, this is the highest level of hubris to sell a car to green people, the green crowd, which generally skew heavily liberal, heavily coastal elite. That's the classic definition, right? And then go and do what Elon's doing and not see that there could be a backlash.
I mean, so I'm looking at the numbers here. It's revenue, and this is third-party reporting, but it's from their report. So revenue's down 20%, sales were down 13%. We're not going to talk about the stock price because that's very down. Pick a day also. It's a tough position to be in, and what's next for Tesla? Well, there was this reported next model, which was going to be a cheaper Model Y, and I don't really know what that means because you can't take a lot out of a Model Y. Yeah. I mean, you can put less nice stuff in it, but there's already very little in it to begin with. That's the Tesla ethos. That's what people like about it. But do you just put junkier stuff in there? And then what's the point of having a robo-taxi, robo-car, that it isn't robo in the way that it's supposed to be, but why is that not the cheaper model? Yeah. Why don't you make that the car?
Yeah.
There's a lot going on.
2?
There's a lot going on.
Where's the Model 2? Where's the Roadster?
Alex, where is the Roadster?
Where's the Roadster?
So, and I got to,
if I challenge people to go back, and I don't want to be like I was right, but I will just say that this was foretold by not just me, by a lot of people that looked at the auto industry and said, there are always fads. The question for Tesla is not whether or not they will ride high at the moment. The question is when there is a competitive product that delivers what customers want with a greater sense of normalcy, how will customers respond? And I think we're starting to see that because even before, Elon went off the rails, we already saw softening in customer demand because there were cars out there that had buttons and had air vent controls where you wanted them. They had an instrument cluster. They had a head-up display. They had these things that a lot of customers wanted, CarPlay, Android Auto, you name it. And so the moment you have a viable alternative, and by viable I mean reasonable performance, reasonable range, reasonable charging. Doesn't have to beat Tesla, although I would argue that they probably should have tried. The moment you have those, you do see that there is a pretty solid customer demand. GM has sold a shocking number of Ultium things combined. I didn't think that was the most competitive thing out there, but they're there at your local dealer lot. They got lots of buttons and big screens, and they're comfy, and that seems to be what a lot of people want.
Even though they don't have CarPlay or Android Auto, they keep selling.
Yeah, and the Hyundai Kia Group has been selling a lot more EVs year over year. They've had a really consistent growth, and they're really stuff in the pipeline with models where, as Tesla has really, that's the funny thing in a way, is that Tesla has the ability to create variants of these products that they haven't. And I wonder if some of that is simply the focus on the showmanship, maybe too much focus on software and changes, and not enough focus on trying to broaden the model lineup. And what I mean by that is Tesla has long changed battery packs and motors without regular body style changes. So they don't do the usual 3 to 6 year cycle of things, right? So the more changes. Maybe it would have been better if they had held steady there and only updated the motors every 3 years and had an extra model in the lineup. Like maybe they should have had a different SUV or a whatever, or this cheaper car or something in the lineup rather than this. There's still time to pull it out, but I wonder also, Tesla clearly would not be where they are today without Elon, right? They would not have a 20% sales loss without Elon at the helm. But they also would not have been a car company without Elon. So they could not have gotten to, May of last year.
They couldn't get to the point where they could drop if they,
right,
yeah.
If he hadn't been there. And that is kind of this weird problem with a company that is a cult of personality in this way. And cult of personality really best describes Tesla. Because you hear from, our friend Miriam, don't want to throw anybody under the bus. No one knows who Miriam is, I'm sure, in this conversation. Not a specific Miriam, unless you're listening. We love you. But Miriam is very obsessed with software-defined cars. And everything should be software-defined. It's always Tesla, 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 until recently. And
we talked about that a couple weeks ago. Yeah.
And I will just say that there are a lot of cars that are almost as software-defined or as software-defined in this way as Teslas, but they lack the showmanship and this singular direction and the cult of personality associated with it that has made Tesla successful. I mean, they've even managed to sell people some freaking fucking ugly Cybertrucks. Why could this not have looked like a pickup truck as was promised? Or at least have been...
Yeah, go ahead.
Or at least have been as wackadoodle as was promised.
Well, and not to mention things like tequila, beer, flamethrowers, surfboards. And this is, full disclosure for folks who are listening. I think a lot of folks on our YouTube channel are aware of it, but I used to work at Tesla. I was there from a period between 2015 and 2019. I am a shareholder, so full disclosure there. But for example, I took Roadster reservations. When the Roadster was released, I had people come in and do an ACH transfer or try to hand me a check for $200,000 for a Roadster reservation. And that was a long, long time ago. And I have a lot of friends still there, but from the company perspective, I look at where are they heading? What is next? And the Model 3 refresh, great. I mean, truly great. The Model Y refresh, I'm not so sold on the design, but it got a suspension upgrade, things that it needed to do. I still need to go drive it, but I've heard very good things from people I trust. The Cybertruck is the one that I am left scratching my head, because what do you do if the Cybertruck doesn't pop off? And there was always a chance that this is going to be the hot new thing. You have to take risks. But why did the board say, what, we all think this is going to pop off, you should definitely do this, and then when it doesn't, what do you do now? And it's not the product that was promised, this all new integrated skeletal thing. It's not what it is, but it's still going to be much more difficult to do a version 2. There is no put a new nose and bumper on it, and it's a different car.
Yeah,
and it's
tricky
is a
because
lot
it
of
doesn't
money.
And the problem with the Cybertruck is this is the first, and maybe this is where just the Emperor's New Clothes situation comes in, but the Cybertruck is the first Tesla, I would argue, I'm scratching my head on Model Y, but I'm going to go stick with this statement. It's the first Tesla that doesn't actually do anything better than the competition other than look unique. And, if you love the look, that's great. I think that generally speaking, the public as a whole has said, on the look, and they're not really selling that well. But if you love the look, great for you. But fit and finish, terrible. They've had mechanical issues here and there. That's not even the problem.
The other thing that it's best
But
at
that's not
is
even the
having
problem,
the
though.
best standard covered cargo area in a factory truck. That's it.
That's only because it has a standard cover.
Correct. That's what I'm saying. I know. I know.
You would have a bigger cargo area with a cover in any other truck. But anyway,
That's correct. Yeah.
But it's like, it's not the fastest truck. It's not the fastest charging truck. It's not the longest range truck. It doesn't actually have the biggest bed. It doesn't have the biggest back seat. It doesn't do any of these other things that well. And it doesn't even charge that quickly at most Tesla stations because it's an 800 volt EV, and Tesla kind of ran out of the cash, it seems like, before they really started the rollout of the V4 supercharger stations. I will say that I found more shocking than other things that, and maybe it's because Cybertruck kind of went sideways, but they rolled out one 800 volt EV. Model 3 and Model Y did not go 800 volt, which seems very strange to me. And maybe that's why the rollout of V4 is slow, but I had honestly expected, and this is where I was really wrong, I had honestly expected to have Tesla come out gangbusters and have, by today, probably at least 3/4 or half of their stations V4 800 volt native stations. That's kind of what was promised, that trajectory.
Especially when everyone started signing on for NACS. I mean, that to me seems like it's a profit opportunity where it says this makes sense to reinvest in this. And the long-term game there, not that charging is where a lot of money is made, all things considered, but the opportunity there is the more charging we can get through, the more money we can make. So let's go ahead and beef up this infrastructure. The thing for me is that, and again, this really has nothing to do with my having worked there, but for the longest time, Tesla was truly the best electric vehicle. It doesn't mean it was the best vehicle. It just did electric the best. It was high performance. It was, they gave you all the acceleration. They didn't tone things down. It was the easiest to go charge because the network was there and it told you where to go, and it always preheated, and it integrated with your phone in a way a lot of cars hadn't at that time. And here's a big touch screen, but they haven't done enough to keep competitive. I think we are right on the cusp right now where they're about to not be the best electric car. Again, with this weird caveat. Yeah. I don't know if we're right there yet, but there's so much competition that is 100% knocking on the door that something's got to give.
I don't think currently I would rank any Tesla as best in its segment at the moment, bearing in mind we haven't driven the new refreshed Model Y. Stylistically, not a big fan of the Cybertruck bar on the front of the Model Y, but other than that, I think the rest of it seems fine. But best is a tricky term, so we'll reserve judgment there. They've supposedly improved the suspension. Suspension tuning was a little bit of a problem for me before. Also interior volume, other things, efficiency, whatever else. Like there are other options. The problem, I think, for Tesla, especially worldwide sales for Tesla, has been that they have for a while have not had the best electric car, and those have been coming from China.
Correct. And I do mean in this market. And it's the best car at being electric, but I don't mean it is the best car that you can buy that is electric.
Yeah.
It's, like I said, it's a weird category thing, but something's got to move there. And Tesla has had cash. They've had tons of valuation. They have opportunity, but they are being a little bit hindered by the one who makes the decisions.
Yep. And let us know what you think about all the decisions that we've been making down there in the comment section below. You can also send us your voice memos and questions to hey@autobuyersguide.com. And don't forget those 5-star reviews, because hopefully we will have some more to read out loud. And the lack of 5-star reviews has been making Travis cry himself to sleep every night.
I lock myself in the office. I don't even get to go to bed until there are more 5-star reviews. Also, let us know, this is the first time I think our animals have made any sort of official appearance. Should we make a kitty cat podcast shirt? I'm thinking 2 cats with microphones. There's an opportunity there. Let us know.
Mine has decided that the sun is the place to be, and so she's asleep when she should be
right over
working.
here.
It's lazy, lazy, lazy cats.
I know. That's why we got to do all the work in the meantime.
Yep. See everybody later.
Adios.
Auto Buyer's Guide.